This is Real Talk, the Customer Insights Show with Jenn Vogel. Join Jenn and her guests for this live discussion around topics that will help you understand your customers better. Also available on podcast channels. This live stream is presented to you by Vox PopMe, the leader in video research. Here's today's live conversation.
Hello, insights professionals, marketers, and everyone who wants to understand your customers better. I'm Jenn Vogel, and today I want to talk about continuing education for researchers. So to dive into that topic, I'm joined by the founder and editor of insightsplatforms.com, a knowledge hub for user research, consumer insights, data analytics, and software solutions. Mike Stevens has been serving the insights community in this way for 4 years and is joining us today. Thanks for coming. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Hi, Jen. Nice to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really pleased to have you today. I apologize. I'm fully bundled as my heat is broken on the first semi-cold day of the year. So hopefully I'll not freeze to death on the show today.
That's fine. No blue lips so far. You're okay.
So far I'm not shivering. Yeah, but we'll heat things up in the conversation today. So to get us started, could you tell us a little bit about yourself and insightsplatforms.com?
Sure. Yeah, thanks, Jen. So I've been running this business now, the Insight Platforms business, for about 3.5 years, and I've been an independent consultant in the research and insight space, specializing in technology and digital. Before that, worked for various companies you may or may not have heard of: Vision Critical, Kantar, small research agency business, when I started consulting as an independent, I thought it would be, a nice, easy life, that it would be, that business would come to me straightforwardly. And it turns out, when you do consulting work, you're either hunting for it or you're buried under it, as I have been this weekend. So I don't do very much anymore, but this weekend was a busy one doing some consultancy. So a lot of what I was doing was helping brands, insight teams, agencies figure out how do they navigate this whole technology space, who's out there, what capabilities, what skills, what tools, and built up quite a lot of knowledge about the businesses in this area. Obviously, Vox PopMe, one of the kind of leading players in the digital research space. Lots and lots of other companies that have launched over the last 5 years, especially. So launched the site Insight Platforms as a directory to start with, and really is a place where I could blog, share content, write stuff, with impunity, because I run the site, so nobody can tell me what I can't say. So, that works quite well. And it's grown from there, really. So we now do, there's 2 of us full time. We do a lot of events. We do live events. We do everything's, on demand available. We run these demo days. And last week we ran this behavioral insights summit. So lots of educational focus, lots of, trying to help people understand the new evolution of insights and research, because there's a lot going on.
Yeah, there really is a lot going on. And that's such a big need right now, is people to help navigate the landscape. Very similar to kind of MarTech and how MarTech has expanded. Absolutely. From no marketing companies to 7,000 technology players to choose from. Yeah. I mean, MR Tech has really evolved in a very similar way. And I think a lot of people are struggling to navigate the landscape.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. It has. And hi, Jen's dog. Welcome to the show.
A regular on the show. He's very excited about this conversation today. Welcome to the show, Henrik.
Yeah, you're right. When I launched the directory, there were 200 companies listed there. Research tech, and I guess the definition of the space is expanding a lot all the time. So when you look at CX platforms, customer experience, you've got user research tech, you've got a lot of research tech products in the product management space, because when people are building apps and websites, they need feedback to go along with the analytics. So there's an enormous new collection of tools. It's not as big as the MarTech space, but there's about 1,500 in the Insight Platforms directory now. So, technology businesses, data sources. So, it's getting harder and harder to stand out from the crowd.
Okay, in case you didn't hear that, that's 200 technology companies to 1,500 in three
Yeah,
and a half years. I
yeah,
mean, that
that's right.
is a huge shift in a very short time. And there's constantly new companies that are emerging. And, I every day seeing new, seed round funding for a brand new technology company that's just coming out. Like, it's not going to slow down.
Yeah,
There's certainly, it's an exciting space to be in, clearly. So the
it is.
growth is exponential.
It is incredible, and it is a bit like the investment community has woken up in the last 18 months, 24 months.
Mhm.
They really figured out that there's something here, and there's a lot of roll-up plays going on. There's big money coming in. There's some eye-watering funding rounds that have been taking place in the kind of related space of analytics, content analytics, A/B testing. Content Square took $500 million, on a $3 billion valuation. What is really it's an A/B testing optimization platform. So, there's a lot happening in this, research technology area.
Yeah. What do you think's driving all that interest from an investment standpoint?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in rolling up. So analytics, data, research and feedback. It's a very, very fragmented space right now. There's a huge need for businesses to understand customers. There's growth in demand everywhere. What I see where I am still consulting with brands is everybody wants to understand the customer. So even people who are working in, relatively distant departments, maybe finance, maybe, HR, people have really drunk the Kool-Aid of the whole customer centricity. They need to understand what's happening. They want to see the data. They want to see the analytics. So the demand is coming from everywhere in the organization, which is it's a blessing and a headache for the people who are holding the keys, I guess, to the customer research tools, because they need to support that. But clearly there needs to be some control around it as well. So I think big demand, big opportunities as well. So I think some of the analytics space, the research space, there's a lot of there's a lot of margin potential, I think, in some of these businesses that have been on that transition path from professional services to technology. I think that's where a lot of the value is.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this is just not going to stop the dog barking
Yeah,
thing.
it's
So
fun.
here we go. We're rolling with it.
It adds some texture. It's good.
Exactly. It's a game now. It's like extreme podcasting. Um, so I mean, I totally agree. I think, like, you've been in the industry a long time. When I started in the industry in 2010, the only people talking about consumer understanding and customer centricity was researchers, like
Yeah.
insights people, professionals in the space. And there is such a demand now from these other departments, and the C-level, the finance department, certainly the marketers and innovation teams are way more interested and talking a lot more of, oh, there he is, about customer insights than ever before. So I see that push and pull of, as you say, it's good to have that demand internally, and to feel that that value for the role and for the department in a different way. But there is some balance of trying to make sure all the needs are met, and that there's a lot of competing priorities now, and a lot more people who are competing for the time of the insights department that weren't before.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And so when it comes to the top skills for researchers that you see, what are those? What are the skills that insights teams need now that maybe they didn't before?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, because I think when you focus it on consumer insights teams, then I think it leads towards one set of answers. I think when you look at all of the other users of consumer insight who need to know a little bit more, so the people who are not expert users but maybe are in brand teams or product teams, still need to be educated in how do you speak to customers, understand them, a big part of product school for product management is about understanding users and the research process. So I think there's two answers to this. I think one is the kind of specialist territory, and that's insight teams, agencies, and I think particularly where there's been a legacy of market research, I think a lot of people are on a journey here, and there's a lot of new territory for people with that background to really get their head around. So I tend to break it into 4 or 5 chunks, really. I think there's core research skills, which are still very important. Desk research, survey design, analysis, qualitative research, and obviously there are kind of layers of depth within that. But increasingly, user research, usability, UX, I think that's bleeding into qualitative research. I think there's a lot more in common than separates those disciplines. So those are big areas of growth. I think that the second area, which is very big and quite sprawling, is analytics and behavioral insights. And they can come from video observations, they can come from large scale data sources, from social media, from scraping Instagram posts. There's so many new ways in which data can reveal understanding about people, and the AI tools, machine learning, these are, you're not going to need to code the models from scratch. You're not going to learn how to build them in Python, but you are going to need to use them to be able to understand, what's happening with audiences. How are my brand codes manifesting themselves on Instagram? What are we looking like? That type of thing. I think that the next two are really broader business skills more than specific research skills. But I think one of the things that has being candid has held back a lot of researchers and insight professionals is their ability to frame their results and their impact in commercial terms. So to be able to talk about driving growth in cash flow terms, in churn reduction, really speaking the language that marketers, that commercial people will understand. And I think there's some great work is being done by the guys at LinkedIn, the B2B Institute, and they're publishing some amazing content. It's very, very, simply framed, very accessible. But the piece that came out this week was talking about the cash flow funnel. So when you think about, as a marketer, and this is a lesson that researchers I think should adopt as well. But the marketer, you might have a funnel. You've got a lot of people at the top, and then eventually you're going to get some sales at the end. You've got lead gen. You've got various activities through that funnel. In order to, this is what they're recommending. In order to make it understandable for the finance team, you need to reframe it as a cash flow funnel, and talk about near-term cash flows, current cash flows down towards the end of the funnel. And actually 95% of what's in your B2B funnel is going to be people who are not in the market to buy right now. So you frame it as future cash flows. You put a value against it. And, these are the types of frameworks and thinking that I think a lot of researchers will need to take to heart if they're going to be able to sell their stories better. Which really is the kind of the final point. More about how do you communicate, how do you tell stories? So skills like data visualization, data journalism, narrative, how do you actually, get across and land the insights with the people who are going to be taking action? So I think, those 4 things really for me, core research skills, and then this huge area of, behavioral insights and analytics, which covers, neuro and emotion AI and all these new things. And then you've got fundamentals of business, framing things in commercial terms, because a lot of people come from, humanities, arts backgrounds into research. They don't necessarily have the kind of money grounding that is needed. And then the communication skills, the narrative building and visualization. Those, I think, are the 4 territories that are, most important for growth.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And I think, as an industry, we talk a lot about storytelling and how to make the insights easy to understand and actionable. But that piece that you mentioned about framing it for your audience and speaking in their language, I don't think is something we talk about very often. And I almost think of it as like understanding your internal customer. Like as an insights professional, you should be like really well equipped to know exactly how to speak to your internal customer. But that's certainly not the primary focus, right? The primary focus is understanding the buyer of your product, or, the person who's watching your ads. But really understanding who your internal customer is and speaking to them in a language they understand. I mean, this feels like sort of game changing in terms of what that skill set. Like, I'm wondering, like, how would an insights team kind of get started with getting that understanding, or is it really just a mindset shift?
I mean, there are specific experts, there are specific training courses available. As part of Insight Platforms, we have the Insight Platforms Academy. We, from time to time, we have one of the somebody who's a real expert in helping researchers to tell stories and frame narrative. Caroline Florence, she teaches a course on on storytelling for insights and analytics people. So there are definitely specialist areas to learn. There's an enormous amount of self-service and free content that is available now. There's just so much that you can go and find. And to be honest, very low cost. And I don't want to divert opportunities away from my own business, but there's a lot of good stuff if you find the right course on Udemy or on Coursera. You can really build up some skills in a very accessible way. These are short form videos, on demand content. It's it's very easy to find the right stuff.
Yeah. And so to that point, I mean, there is so much content out there, whether that's on your platform or another or whatever. But, where would you recommend a researcher get started when they're kind of embarking on this journey of continuing their education?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not so familiar with a lot of other countries, but certainly, the UK, we've got the Market Research Society. In the US, the Insights Association, the Research Society in Australia. I think for the first of these areas, I think that, the core research skills, those industry bodies are, a good place to start for some of this stuff. I think when it gets into some of these newer areas, into analytics, into behavioral science, then I think you need to look further afield. With the greatest of respect, I know that the research associations are moving into these areas, but there's just such a lot for them to cover with finite resources. So, analytics, there's great websites, like KD Nuggets that you can subscribe to. There are, there's a lot of free training courses in that area. For behavioral science, there's actually a lot of good books that you can read. So there's things like Decode by Phil Barden, just to understand the overall framework and thinking around behavioral economics, behavioral science. But underneath it needs time. I think that's the challenge, and I think the fundamental thing is we need to acknowledge that people need time to develop their skills. And I think, if you were to say somewhere between 5 and 10% of your available working hours should be reinvested in building skills, that works out, 2 to 4 hours a week on a kind of standard week if people work them. So it's not an enormous amount of time, but it is something. We all work in a knowledge economy, building knowledge, sustaining it, keeping it fresh. It's actually a key part of what people need to do. So I think it's a reasonable benchmark to say kind of 5 to 10% of time to be spent in a mix of structured and unstructured learning.
Yeah, I love that suggestion. And I know for me, like, I have to block time on my calendar for it specifically. Yeah. 3 hours a week is dedicated to some kind of, whether it's, education or just kind of honestly, like, scrolling through LinkedIn and seeing what topics are trending. I think there was a time where that felt like, not doing work, but it's so important to kind of know what's going on in the industry and what people are talking about. So, and any range between like taking a formal course, reading a book, or just doing like staying up to date on what people are talking about. I have to physically block off calendar time on my calendar and keep it sacred. Otherwise I won't do it. Yeah,
I think that's right. And I think it has to be seen as, not as an indulgence or not something that's taking you away from work. Actually, this is contributing to your ability, to do better at work. If you can, if you work for an agency, if you can drop into conversation with a client, much more contextual understanding about their industry or about what's motivating their customers or about what's happening because you're investing the time to learn around it, then I think that pays back for you, and it pays back for for your agency, for your business.
Yeah, 100%. And then what do you think about, those people who are not in insights departments? Like you mentioned, we're talking about the skills for researchers, but you mentioned the users of research, those brand teams and product teams. Like, what are the skills that they should be thinking about pursuing understanding of, and, how should they be going about that?
Yeah, I think there are different ways to frame it for this audience, and I think I think of it a little bit like if you're a MailChimp user, or if you are an amateur email marketer, you work in a small business, or you're sending out to a list of a few thousand people, you don't take a degree in email marketing. You probably don't really do any structured learning about email marketing. What you have is about 6 or 8 types of resources that help you get up to speed. So there'll be templates, there'll be hints and tips, there'll be emails that get you started, there'll be in-app support, there'll be onboarding tools and various things like that. So I think this is really where the technology and the kind of the knowledge really comes together, because if you're a technology platform in the space, let's say that you are you concept testing, ad testing, whatever it is, you may be being used by brand teams who don't really need to know how to design a research survey from scratch, but they do need to know how to put the right content in that's not going to be stupid, and they need to know how to interpret the results. So you focus on some of that. You have free training webinars. A lot of companies have online academies. We've just run a very successful course with Recollective, which is a qualitative research platform. So a kind of 6-part introduction to online qualitative research. And again, very kind of snackable content. It's freely accessible. We've got people all around the world taking this course. It's not here's how to use the Recollective platform. It's like, here are the broader skills that you need, obviously with Recollective as an illustration of the ways in which it can be used. So I think that, there's a lot of coming together of structured learning, in-app help, support. If I'm a brand manager, I don't wake up in the morning thinking I really want to learn more about how to do research. It's like, just give me enough so that I know what I'm doing. I'm not going to make the wrong call on things. And I'm not going to get overwhelmed. So I think that's the mix of approaches for the non-expert audiences.
Yeah. And I think also this is probably a really good opportunity for collaboration internally with the teams, right? There's been a lot of tension in the last several years between marketers and insights folks as technology becomes more accessible and easier to use and DIY, and the democratization of research is a very polarizing topic, right?
Yep.
And I understand why, the researchers are, expert in their field, and, not anyone can do what a researcher can do. And so it does feel like a good opportunity if you are a brand manager, or you're working on a marketing team, to collaborate with your insights team and say, what do I need to know to do a very quick, short, survey with my audience? I'm going to continue to come to you for the really important stuff, but how do I get by on the smaller stuff? And maybe that collaboration can really help to drive that democratization of research forward in a smart way.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I understand your eagerness to be polite and respectful to researchers, but I think just your previous comment about not everybody can do what they do. Actually, to be honest, technology can do quite a bit, and it's about taking the knowledge and encoding it into software in a way that is, safe, well structured, and actually helps researchers so that they're not doing, basic, boring stuff. They can actually get their marketing colleagues and their other colleagues to go and run things. So you look at how effective something like a Zappy or a Kantar Marketplace has been at putting human intellectual property into an environment, a technology environment that people without deep expertise can run safely and not kind of end up betting the farm on a terrible idea because it was badly designed research. That's the outcome, and that benefits researchers as well. But I do understand there's a lot of anxiety around this whole democratization, because people take a free survey tool, they ask a dumb question to the wrong people, they pick and choose the answers they want, and then they go and try and get a business case pushed through on dodgy data. So that happens. It does.
Yeah. I think it's easy to kind of go either way. It's it is easy to run bad research, and it's easy to run good research if you use the right skills and the right technology. I totally agree. It's certainly come a long way. Like, there is a reason why a lot of businesses don't have insights teams any longer, but they are ensuring that their marketers or whoever is running research has the skills that they need to run it effectively and make smart decisions based on the data that they're getting.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think what I've noticed over the last few years, particularly with the more the kind of scale up businesses that go with more of a technology background, is the sequence is they'll obviously have like product technology people in. Once they start to get analytics, then they've grown to a point where at a certain point they'll add insight and research people after they've had a lot of the product analytics and the and the behavioral stuff. So it's actually a very different trajectory to a lot of established businesses who may have started with the old style market research and then tried to build in analytics. So it's it's a different kind of growth pattern.
Yeah, I think that's the big difference. Certainly all the kind of more startup D2C companies, or, these newer kind of fintech companies, they are starting with those analytics skills first and then building on insights later. I agree with that. And what about, content formats? I mean, maybe we can debate the best ones for us, but webinars, ebooks, courses, podcast, like in-person, virtual, like how do you what format do you prefer to learn on, and how do you know that that's what works best for you?
Well, I can tell you what people are starting to get a bit tired of, and I think it's a Zoom fatigue thing and an oversupply. Webinars are, let's say, the gap between people who sign up for them and actually attend is growing all the time. And, I think that's a lesson as a kind of content platform for us to try and figure out, well, how do we convey stuff? I'm a big fan of bite-sized content. So, we have a learning management platform. We chunk stuff up into short form videos. So it's 5 minutes as a chapter to learn something, as a component of, let's say, this qualitative research course. So people can do it on their own time. They can do it, on different devices. They can come back to it when they like. So I think that, and you've seen a lot of the ed tech, the learning tech investments that have gone in outside of the research industry. There's a huge amount of money going into that space, and I think people like to be able to learn flexibly. For me, I think the other elements of a learning strategy, it's really pick and mix, and it's kind of mood based, it's topic based. So we had last week a couple of days at the first in-person event in London, went back to Quirks. And it was great to see people. It's fantastic. Now this is probably why I've got a sore throat and a bad chest this week. I'm exposed to germs in the research industry again. But it's great being able to actually sit in sessions and just kind of chat naturally to people and go up to them at the end. And so that to me is always going to be in the mix. The kind of the interaction. Obviously, it's expensive to attend. It's expensive to to travel to. So it's not feasible for everybody. I think the kind of blog articles, LinkedIn posts, bits and pieces. I think probably like a lot of people these days, we acquire knowledge in smaller pieces. We don't sit down and read War and Peace. We don't go and end to end on long form content in the same way that we might have done. And I think we have to recognize, we're in an environment of kind of TikTok, Instagram reels, bite size, 15-second attention, short 2-minute video explainers, that type of thing. And I think it's, where people are expected to have that kind of horizontal part of the T shape for their knowledge. I think it's very appropriate for that sort of thing. I think that, the deep stuff, I think there's no substitute for, for kind of focused learning, switch everything off, head down, and, immerse yourself.
Yeah, I agree with that. One of the things I've been really liking to do over the last couple of years is I got a Blinkist subscription, which allows me to listen to like the cliff notes basically of any book I want in, 7 minutes or whatever, however long the blinks are. And what I then do is after I've completed that blink, if it's interesting enough to me, I'll read the whole book or I'll listen to the full length audiobook. However, I tend to actually reserve my like physical reading for non-business books. And then my business stuff, I do audio, but either way, podcasts, audiobooks, but it's kind of great that that short form content is how I figure out where I'm going to invest my time.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I want to learn more about that topic, or I want to hear more from that author or that teacher because I was really drawn to the short form stuff. But there's so much out there to choose from. I don't want to invest, however many hours into reading a book that I'm not going to learn anything from.
Yeah. And I think, there are tools. I was looking at something the other day, which is like, an AI based text summarizer tool. So, it uses GPT-3. You can have it as a Chrome extension. And, where there's long form content online, it basically condenses it and pulls out the key messages for you. And, so I think we'll see a lot more of those tools trying to, condense and, bring bite-sized content, a little bit like the Blinkist approach, but, to more sources.
Totally. And I completely agree with your assessment of webinars. I think there's just been so much more webinar content available over the last couple of years that people don't want to sit on an hour-long webinar. Now, that being said, so we haven't done a webinar in almost a year. And about a week or two ago, we did a 15-minute webinar. It was just like a quick, hey, we got something we want to tell you about. And, you don't have to invest a lot of time to hear about it. And, that worked. That worked well because people don't want to invest a lot of time. But I do agree that, back in the day, you could get 50-60% of people who registered to show up for a webinar. That's not the case anymore. There's just way too much out there. And honestly, like I'll register for a webinar because I want to listen to the content at my convenience, right? I want to build that into my time I've blocked off for learning.
Exactly.
Yeah.
No, it takes a while. It's it's certainly a bit of a rethink for me as to formats. I like that idea, the kind of 15-minute bite-sized pieces. Some of the content we've got on the site, we'll try and condense it into, edited down videos or create a video off the back of a longer blog post that's 2 minutes long, that type of thing. So definitely more creativity, I think, is needed to help with the learning content.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this has been a really great conversation. I appreciate you coming on. I hope you feel better. Hopefully this wasn't quirks related. I'm glad you got back in person. But thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thanks for having me. Nice to chat.
Absolutely. Thanks everyone for listening. We will be back with another episode next week. As always, we look forward to seeing you then.